Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. My name is Desiree, and I'm project manager for the TBI Justice Initiative here at Disability Rights North Carolina. Disability Rights, or DRNC, is a legal advocacy agency that fights for the rights of people with disabilities. We handle cases involving discrimination, abuse, and other rights violations. All of our services are at no cost to North Carolinians, and we are a private, independent 501c3 and a member of the National Disability Rights Network. This panel is to give a space for those who are veterans, their spouses, or their caregivers that have faced some form of brain injury throughout their career or even afterwards. We're here to honor them and also honor the vet for Veterans Day as well, and honor all of the fallen folks who have protected our country. So I really want to give the floor to each and every person that is on here and give them a chance to speak. We'll be asking a few different questions that are pertinent to folks who face a brain injury or care for other people. So without further ado, I will go around the Zoom and ask folks to introduce themselves. On my screen, I have first to the left, Rose.
Thank you, Desiree. I'm Rose Randall. Me and my husband reside in Jackson Springs, North Carolina, which is around the Pinehurst area. We were both in the Army. I am the chair of North Carolina's Brain Injury Council, and my husband,
David.
And your occupation?
So I did 33 plus years in the Army, but I quit counting after that, and I've been a contractor now, still working with wounded, ill, and injured soldiers on Fort Bragg. So I haven't really ever left government service. Been doing that for about 41 years, but I actually, in my role now, I'm actually around a lot of folks who've had severe traumatic brain injuries, as well as multitude of other injuries and illnesses. These are all these young soldiers that still on active duty, or they're getting ready to transition out, and you just don't hear about them. But I see them every day, and I see the reality of what service has done to many of these kids. And I say they're kids because I'm 61, and most of them are in their 20s and 30s. So I have never left service since I became an adult, and now in my capacity, I'm still around soldiers. I was in special operations my entire career. Lots of deployments, lots of jumps out of airplanes, and now I support soldiers who are doing the same things that I did, except that they unfortunately got unlucky with a bad landing or a bad blast or something like that. Now a lot of them are being separated for service because of many of these injuries.
And both of us, I was in special operations. That's how we met, and both of us are brain injury survivors, and so we recognize symptoms and all of that in ourselves and in each other. So us.
Well, thank you both for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for the invite. It's our pleasure.
Of course. I have Adam to my right of the screen.
Hi, my name's Adam Shaw. I'm in Elon, North Carolina. I was in the Navy for about 9 years. I'm a technical project manager. And you want me to continue for a relation to brain injury, or just wait for that?
You can mention whatever you want regarding your brain injury or anyone else that you know.
Yeah, I'm a brain injury survivor myself. And we have an now grown child who suffered a traumatic brain injury as well.
Glad to have you here, Adam. I have to the bottom right, I have Saleha.
Hello, everyone. I'm Saleha Williams. I am a 3L at the North Carolina Central University School of Law. I am also a wife of it'll be 32 years in April. But my husband served 21 plus years in the Army as a paratrooper, and he suffered injury during the jump over in Iraq, where, coming down, landing the wrong way. And so it's been a struggle since then, just trying to make sure that it doesn't make him feel less than. I feel like that's my role as the caregiver, to make him feel like he was the person that he was before the injury as much as possible. And lately I can see the frustration, so at certain times with things, especially his memory. He can get frustrated, and for me, the best way is to make light of it. It's like, hey, honey, it's okay. We're all getting older anyway, you know. So for me as a caregiver, I just want to bring awareness to people and let them know, like, you have to be mindful of the injury, and that requires patience and understanding, you know. So that's what I would like to bring to the table.
And you do. I've met her husband, and he's absolutely wonderful. And he has an incredible story, just like all of you. And last but not least, Carrie.
Thank you, Desiree. So I'm Carrie White, and I'm 10-year Army veteran, paratrooper. First brain injury was a concussion on my very first jump as a cadet in ROTC. I was at airborne school and knocked out, was dragged by the chute, and I woke up looking at a drill sergeant yelling at me to get up and get off the DZ. And I had no idea where I was, why I was there, and I just started crying. And so that was my first experience. Everyone sloughed that off. That was just a minor back of the head injury, and I made it through airborne school. My last assignment was Special Ops Command. I had several tree landings, and we had an SF commander in our unit. And so he took every opportunity to get us jumping. So a lot of helo jumps, and I unfortunately wasn't the best at finding the direction of the air. And so I had a hole through my face at one point and had to go emergency ambulance to Womack to have my face surgically adjusted from a riser. Anyway, it's a pleasure to be here with other veterans, and I am also a caregiver. My husband's a veteran. We have 9 children. We've been married 37 years. Still together, they're all ours, single deliveries, and 7 of the 9 have served in the military or they're currently serving. And I applaud them for that because, well, paid for college for a lot of them. 1 enlisted, went Rogue Air Force, but the rest used ROTC scholarships to help put them through, and then have served or they're currently in. My oldest daughter is the one that suffered a severe traumatic brain injury, though, 10 years ago, and she is completely incapacitated. I care for her full time, but I have a nice team of caregivers. And over the years, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I have become the consummate, persistent advocate. And I've gotten a lot of things for her that I know have definitely increased her livelihood here in the home, but it's the best it can be. We have her home, but it's around the clock care. And I will say her brain injury has caused some areas of prejudicial discrimination in the way that, and I've had conversations with you, Desiree, about this in the arena of custody, in caring for her little girl who she didn't see for almost 3 years. We saw for 2 weeks this summer, and who knows when we'll see her again because of the family court system, and they don't get along with brain injury and the family court system. Anyway, I am really looking forward to sharing anything I can that could help in that capacity of caring for someone with a chronic living with brain injury for so many years, and how we're handling that and how we're being looked at in society.
Thank you, Carrie, for being here, for sharing that. I want to start by posing to everyone, but I'll go one by one. How did you figure out that you had a brain injury, or how did you obtain it? We can keep the response brief to give everyone a chance. I want to start with Rose.
I kind of knew I had a brain injury. I mean, I knew something was wrong. It was in airborne school, and I was on one of the training apparatus, and it was, they just said, oh, you had your bell rung. I didn't pass out, but I blacked out. I couldn't see. And but at that time, you know, as Carrie alluded to, you know, when you have those black hats in airborne school, they're in your face, you know, yelling at you. And at my airborne school, we had somebody that was trying to, one of the instructors was trying to get the females to quit. We started with 43. I had 8 that graduated in my class, and I was one of 8. And I was like, I'm not quitting. I was one of 8 that ended up graduating. But I found out that I jammed my neck up into the back of my skull. And that's what had happened. And that was my first major incident. And every time I did major physical training, I would black out. Like, I didn't pass out, I would black out. I couldn't see. And the only reason I made it through is because there was a medic in my stick, is what they called it, your, you know, immediate squad that was watching over me. But it led to, I would not go to medical and stuff, but that's what happened. And I didn't have any head injuries during the jumps, but it was on that training. But that was my major one that affects me to this day. I get major migraines, but that was when I obtained it. But it wasn't until almost 8 years later, because that's how long I served, and that was within my first 6 months in the Army. It was during my VA exam as I was getting out that I was explaining all of this, and the physician that was doing the examination, it was a VA. It was not even, didn't have any affiliation with the Army. He's like, this was a concussion. Do you realize this was a concussion? This was a brain injury? And I was like, no. And he goes, really, all of these symptoms, these migraines, these, you know, everything I had been experienced for 8 years. This was a brain injury, but they just, you know, everybody said, oh, you had your bell rung. Oh, you know, you had your bell rung, you know, and it was, you know, because I had gotten hurt on jumps, and, you know, I had dizziness and vertigo and all of these things, you know, signs. But again, it was just, you know, that was the culture, and that was how we were just supposed to suck it up and drive on. And so, you know, we didn't have language or anything like that for it. What about you? This one.
So, and Carrie, we may have crossed paths because I was a Green Beret for 28 of my 33 years. Half my career was on Fort Bragg, the other half was out at Fort Lewis. But to really pinpoint one, well, there were so many different times over the years. You know, I had 1,053 jumps in my career. I never had a malfunction, but I hit hard quite a few times. But in reality, one of the things that we suffered, that we dealt with, was I was a breacher. And one of our bread and butters was to blast into a building and do what we had to do inside the building. And so all the training evolutions of blasting, you know, explosive breaching into buildings, when you're standing this far from a charge that's capable of ripping the door off its hinges, you know, that takes a toll on our bodies, plus a lot of the anti-tank weapons. But a lot of the internal breaching that we would do was exceptionally brutal. And, you know, after you do many iterations of that, especially in training, you know, at the end of the day, you just felt numb. No one really, we didn't really look at it back then as a TBI per se. You know, it rung your bell. It was very loud. It was very fast, but the focus after that was going into a room and doing what we had to do. And usually that meant a lot of gunfire. So you're in enclosed spaces, a lot of concussion. Our weapons are not silence like you see in the movies. Everything's exceptionally loud. Grenades get thrown in close quarters. It's exceptionally loud, and the reverberation is overwhelming. But my actual probably worst event was a jump. If Carrie's familiar with St. Mary at Fort Bragg, it was a regular jump out of a regular old Casa 212 type of airplane, which is a twin engine plane. Again, I was one of the most senior jumpers in our organization. And I came in and I had what I would consider a less than stellar landing because I wanted to land closer to the turn-in point. So Carrie understands this. I ran with the wind, and I thought I was going to be able to turn good enough to land. I landed fine. I just hit so hard. I thought I broke a bone in my leg. I laid there. I shouted. I said an expletive loud enough that the chaplain from my unit about 20 feet away heard me. and he asked if I was okay because I took the Lord's name in vain. What I didn't realize was that at that moment, the pain in my leg was overwhelming the pain in my head. I never hit my head, but we determined later on, because of what happened, that I suffered a TBI in that jump, because that caused a partially detached retina in my left eye.
Wow.
The impact, so I was one of those people that I didn't actually hit my head, but the impact was so hard that my head slamming, down scrambled my brain. And shortly after that, I started having ocular migraines, vertigo issues. And then when I was getting ready to retire, they were looking at my eyes and they said, you got some damage here. So I've spent the last now 10 years seeing specialists for my eyes, but we pretty much determined that partial tear in my retina was from a head injury where I didn't actually hit my head on something, but just the sheer impact caused it. And I was telling Rose today, we were out picking up something from a local fire department, and I've been having issues lately, and I notice it's getting worse as I get older. I'm starting to mispronounce words, slur my speech occasionally, and some of it I think may be stress, but honestly, I've had my bell rung enough times over the years. I think I'm starting to see these subtle effects kicking in as I age.
Wow, that's a really good point. I've seen a lot that folks who get an injury maybe younger, that are veterans, sometimes of course, it may not have been identified properly, but over time, as they age, they start to feel these subtle different effects. But more importantly, the people around them feel it more because they see the difference in their relative. With that, I want to go to Adam. Do you feel that there have been, aside, like, if you could share a little bit about the incident that happened to you, but also, like, do you feel that there have been moments in which you've changed over time?
I think it's a matter of identity. For me, a number of my incidents were prior to my military service and in youth sports. So with those types of scenarios, we've talked about this before, you start to wonder, where do I begin and where does my traumatic brain injury begin? And there's a blurred line between what's me and what's the injury. And when they happen early enough, I think it really starts to affect your perspective on that. So yeah, I think it's probably the best way I can answer. My injuries, I had 2 traumatic brain injuries when I was in service, where I lost consciousness, but the ones prior to that caused those identity questions. And I've talked to a lot of folks, well, not a lot, but many folks who've had traumatic brain injuries, and that's a common question. What's me? What's the injury? Because in some ways we are our brain.
That's a really good point. I think he touched on a couple of points of, like, sometimes we have injuries before, a certain period of our life, when we were kids, when we were adolescents, and sometimes we can't distinguish, well, which one was the most impactful, that really changed the direction of our life. I want to go to Saleha.
Yes.
If you
Okay.
could tell us a little bit about your husband and what challenges he faces.
Well, definitely his memory. And there are times, simple words, where he can't remember. And it's very frustrating to him. And our family way has always been humor, to shift the moment as is, so you find a way to make a joke about it. But we also have those real conversations where it's like, hey, you take a look at your family history and see, has there been any issues? Okay, well, my grandfather was diagnosed with, so is this the injury or is this something I should be concerned about? If that makes sense.
No, it does. I think that very
so
similar.
you're constantly aware, even the minor things that people may take for granted, like, I may laugh it off, especially now being in school. I tell people my brain can only hold rules, regulations, and exceptions right now. I'll be able to hold and maintain normal life later. So for him, he feels as though I'm not doing anything strenuous. Why is it that something simple I can't remember? I can have a full conversation and then 10 minutes later, it's like, wait, what were we talking about again? You know, and it's troubling for him, which makes me as a caregiver want to be more aware, but I also want to be proactive, if that makes sense, and not make him feel less than at the same time. So it's very complicated. Yeah.
No, I think that all makes sense. I think a lot of the times, you know, when we're caring for people, we, like I said earlier, we see these changes, but also, you know, we see them suffering to a degree, and we're trying to help them as best as we can so that they don't necessarily feel like they need to be at the same level that they were, that it's okay to not be okay. Carrie, and if you could share a little bit about, I know you shared your story of how you got your brain injury. If you could share about your daughters and, you know, if you can name one big challenge that she faces.
Thanks, Desiree. She suffered technically it's called a diffuse axonal injury. So shearing of the midbrain stem, shearing and stretching of those axons, and it caused her, they were surprised she wasn't waking up. Her x-ray showed multiple contusions around her skull from sort of that shaken baby syndrome, where you get the skull, the brain is shuffling around in the skull. And they were surprised in the ER that she wasn't waking up at all. And then when she got the MRI at Landstuhl, when we medevaced from Italy back through Landstuhl, they saw that she had some extensive bleeding, and that was really the culprit. Those systems that are most affected by those midbrain stem axons are your alertness, your primary systems, your breathing, things like that. So as a result, she has a suppressed pulmonary system, which puts her at risk all the time for aspiration pneumonia based on not having sensitivity in her throat. She was trached for the first year, 2 years, and I fought to get the trach to get her decannulated. And it would have been worse having a trach all these years. But she doesn't sense the saliva that just continually forms down in her lungs, settles, and becomes bacteria ridden and becomes aspiration pneumonia. So we work on that. We have systems to help do that in the home. She'd be dead if she was in a skilled nursing facility. The challenges we face, she has a face, she doesn't speak. She's essentially, once in a blue moon, when we have her out, someone will come up and talk to her, because that on that particular day, she may actually look somewhat normal. But most of the time, her look is just you can see something's off. And then when you say one word to her and she doesn't even really, other than smile, and she holds up her contractured hand and waves, you know, kind of thing. Over years, contractures are very common from the spasticity and tone developed from the brain injury. But she, I would say that for us, it's a great wheelchair. It allows us to do a lot of things with her, but it prevents us from getting in a lot of places. And I never realized how much I value ramps and how much I value parking spots with handicap accessibility. They're all full though. Everybody's handicapped out there now. And I do find we have to end up going all the way down to an end open area in a parking lot to get into a structure because they're full so much. Yeah, I would say for the particular troubling thing with my daughter is we know she will never be, she's a shell of what she was. She's a simple shell. She finds humor in her day, but we don't have a good way to communicate with her other than a dry erase board. She has too much tone, too much spasticity in her movements, so she can't control a joystick. She can't control anything to make a screen work. Her eye gaze is too flirty. So it's, you know, those are challenges, communication challenges. And her friends have 10 years. They are with families. They have new careers. They've moved on. And it's just what life is. And Kimmy is still in her own eyes 25 years old.
I have a question posed from Rose. How can you clarify a little bit more, like how she was injured, like how she received that brain injury?
Oh, yes. So Kimmy served her 11 months in combat, fob shank, and she came back, PTSD. There was domestic violence with her spouse. There was a restraining order, but she was healing, and she had sought advocacy counseling at Caserno Ederle in Vicenza, which is where she was stationed with the 173rd Airborne. And 8 months after, she was on her way home on the Italian highway, and she was rear-ended in a rental car, Fiat Panda. We don't have those here. She was seatbelted in. There was no alcohol. It was definitely in line of duty, but it was unfortunate that she made it through 11 months of combat and then got back to Italy and ended up a group of Italian teenagers that rear-ended her as she was turning off the highway, spun her, and then she was hit again as she spun back from the next onslaught. Freak accident, honestly, freak accident.
Yeah, it sounds like that wasn't intended, but so it's great that she has you as a support system as well as her family and her siblings. Kimmy is very lucky to have you. I want to transition to a couple of areas that were posed by some folks here regarding pockets and areas of veterans that weren't necessarily identified or given as much attention to. And I want to ask, to different folks here, what spaces do you feel that brain injuries are less recognized? To what particular veteran populations? Because even within veterans, there's subpopulations of females who served, caregivers who often don't get recognized and don't get recognized for the caregiver burnout that they might experience, BIPOC folks, as well as justice involved veterans or any other veterans that you guys can think of that don't get recognized. Oh, and those who experience homelessness. I'd like to go to Adam first. Which folks do you feel are underrepresented when it comes to brain injury?
Well, I mean, I'm a little biased here, so I'm going to probably lean towards the folks in the justice system. But for the sake of discussion, I think I would bring up general population. I think there's a general lack of awareness, as Rose alluded to, in the general population of veterans, understanding the extent, using how little it takes to have a brain injury is not the right way of saying it, but I think there are more people that have brain injuries than they realize. And the lack of awareness in general population creates an underserved community. So that's my answer.
No, that's a great point. I had a conversation not too long ago with some other veterans who, were asking about the initiative that we're doing, and all of you know about the initiative, and that, how do we know that veterans have a brain injury more than the ones that they get identified with the VA? And the reality is that there's so many, because brain injury is one of the things, because there's traumatic and non-traumatic. Oftentimes we don't consider it because, as Rose has mentioned, you got your bell rung and that's it. So I think we really tend to, not consider as, in public forum, how often are brain injuries happening? So Rose, I want to ask you, which populations do you feel are not being identified with brain injury even more so than what we already know?
You're asking me now?
Yeah, you and
Okay.
your husband.
I don't know if it's not identified. The question I was reading on the sheets as I reviewed it, I think it's not recognized. I don't know if it's it's what I said before, is that the veterans, there's a lack of awareness with the veteran community, but, and this is coming from, from discussions we've had before. This is coming from my research, because my dissertation is on life after disability, returning to the workforce after disability for the veteran community. And And I also look at things, you know, as I've expanded my research, I also look at things like after disability. What about those people that can't work, or those who are what's the language, permanent, individually unemployable, and so those that cannot work but choose to work. And so when I think of this, I'm thinking of situations where, so a friend of mine who served, he in 2004 he went to Iraq, and his entire vehicle was blown up. Everybody in the vehicle died except for him. And this kid looked like Elvis Presley. He talked like Elvis Presley. I mean, just, and the man flirted, and he was very, very attractive. Everybody in his vehicle, it was a vehicle-borne IED. He was blown up. I mean, the vehicle was blown up, not vehicle-borne IED, but vehicle was blown up, and he had to completely rehabilitate. It wasn't like the bomb; it was the concussion, because it was an up armored Humvee. And so to this day, he still needs, you know, he has rehabilitated. He had to learn how to walk, talk, sit, stand, speak, everything. But he is not the same. And, you know, this is, you know, that whole, you know, identity before versus after, you know, he's not the same. He does not have that, you know, charisma and that he had before. And what what I what I feel is that is under recognized, underutilized, is that long term, because there is this huge outpouring. Think about it, and it's a societal thing. You know, in the military, we're a culture that takes care of ourselves, and so, you know, there was this huge outpouring when Mac first got hurt. You know, and everybody, you know, how huge outpouring of support. We'll do whatever it takes. We'll take care of you. You know, boom. That was in 2004. Do you think anybody recognizes or supports him now? He's lost, you know, and that's what that's kind of what I'm talking about. This outpouring, you know, we'll take care of you. And this is, you know, my husband and I have had long conversations about this. You know, there's this, you know, huge money and focus and everything else on this war effort. And, you know, but once you're injured, once you are no longer of service to the military and service to our country and service to that war effort, then you're no longer of use to us. And so you are discarded. And, you know, I think about it in terms of, you know, our country really bound together after September 11th. And we were such a unified effort, but that's gone away. And that's how our veterans, especially our disabled veterans, you know, period, not just brain injured, but, you know, really just, you know, our brain injured community, but that's how we're treated. You know, when the injury first happens, you know, there's this huge outpouring support. But where is it, you know, after these long term, you know, necessary, lifelong injuries have happened? It's not there. And that's where I think that the country and community has done our veteran population of disservice. You know, not only for the injured, but for those caregivers and for the survivors. And I'm not saying just the survivors, that those of us are injured, but the survivors who have had to carry on in those caregiver roles, or the ones who have lost them. You know, that there have been so many sacrifices, but, you know, this flag waving outpouring of support that, oh, we wave our flags, you know, on Veterans Day, which is what we're doing this, you know, if you really want to matter, make it count. And that's kind of where, you know, I kind of stand on this perspective, you know, do more for this community, you know. And so I think it's not just, you know, kind of where Adam kind of said, you know, it's not just one piece, it's holistically, and it's not just brain injured. Brain injured gets a big, you know, I think brain injured is a huge piece of it, but it's those, you know, those ones that are incapacitated fully, and brain injured is the ones that are most fully incapacitated. But those incapacitated ones, that they signed that dotted line and they came back, and what have they come back to? And that's where we need the most effort, and it's least recognized. So
Those are all really good points.
yeah.
For your husband, what does he feel is a population that is under recognized or assisted within the veteran community for brain injury?
Well, Carrie's living something with her daughter that we know of some of our clients now, go through. So most of the folks I deal with, typically have all their senses are separated out, either medically retiring or being put out for severance due to an injury. But there are some, in my case, so they've had strokes from head injuries. The head injury was the first thing, the stroke, dying basically en route to the hospital a couple of times, being brought back, and then having to recover from the stroke. It's that long-term thing of when these adults, in their 30s, 40s, 50s, because that's where a lot of these are now, some of my more senior folks, and the thing is, we do what we do to get them to that retirement point and separate from the service. Then they fall under either TRICARE or VA or a combination thereof. We try to keep in touch with them, but our focus for what we do is for active duty folks, all within Special Operations Command. But the reality is, I have clients that they go out into the real world again. They've got major deficits. They do need some type of caregiver assistance. And, we talk about the VA's taking care of them. No, the VA is not a bad thing, but the VA, a lot of people think if, once they get out, the VA is going to contact them. You'll be dead before the VA ever, and they will never contact you. So if the veteran doesn't have the ability to constantly stay engaged to get him or her treatment taken care of, they can fall through the cracks very easily, fast and in a hurry. And that's one of the concerns. And so, when I see these I've got a client right now. He's a father. He's got major PTSD. He's got TBI related issues. He's got some deficits, had some significant suicidal ideations, and he's going to be medically retired within a few months. He's living with his parents. He's estranged from his spouse and kids. And, what I ask is, who's going to help him? Because his parents are older. His parents are in their 70s or 80s. And so what happens to this gentleman when they pass, he's still going to have these lifelong needs. And that's the concern in our office that we deal with every day is, I can help them get to a certain point, but once they leave and they're out, then who takes care of them? And the answer is not the VA. The answer is not TRICARE. It's somebody close to them that's going to continue to help them. And, we know that there's a finite timeline on a lot of those things too. So that's kind of our frustration in my office is we just don't know in the long term what's going to happen to these people.
That's a really good point. I think one of the things that all of us in some way have highlighted is the importance of support at home and the importance of a caregiver to those who need one either on a 24-hour basis or those who just need that additional support to stay engaged. So what do you feel is a space within the veteran community that it hasn't, that doesn't get recognized, if one at all?
I would have to agree with Rose and her husband and say in its totality, none of them get recognized. I feel there's a deficit for veterans totally, especially those that are quote unquote, their disability is not as recognizable, that may be able to have some type of normalcy so they don't get looked at. And I totally agree the VA is not the answer. But I do think a lot of that comes from that mentality, that soldier mentality that you take on while serving in the military. I have to push on, I have to push through, so you tend to ignore the early warning signs, and that becomes your way until, whoa, wait, I can no longer ignore this. But then where do I go for help? Because the VA is going to say, well, hey, you never came here while you were serving. We can't help you. This didn't happen on our watch, so you have to fight tooth and nail to prove that, well, you knew that this happened and this is a possibility, that these symptoms that I'm having and this diagnosis that I just recently got came from that event. They'll fight you tooth and nail instead of saying, hey, you know what? That may be correct. How can we get this veteran some help? Whether it's a woman, someone that's homeless, whether it's a man. I find that the older veterans are less likely to go seek help. They feel that they have to soldier on and just suffer with these symptoms. So if I had to pick a top, I would probably say the older veterans, because they have truly wholeheartedly adopted the mentality that, oh, I'm a soldier, I can soldier through this, instead of getting the proper help. And a lot of the older ones do not have caregivers because they wouldn't get help. So whether their spouse left them because they didn't understand what was going on, or something else happened. You understand what I'm saying? So in totality, all our veterans need help in this area. That I couldn't specify or pinpoint one group. So, but if I would pay attention to the older ones, definitely.
I like that you mentioned that. I think a lot of the times we tend to forget our elders after a certain point, not because we want to, but because sometimes we're in the go of every day. And sometimes we tend to forget, the veterans that are so much older. Today, I want to share with you guys, I attended the VTC in Buncombe, and it was a graduation of two folks. And the people who they had speak there were veterans. I met a veteran from the Vietnam War. And I think that's really important because, we tend to forget the elders sometimes, and we have to mention it, and not just mention it, but do something to actively be there with them, because they are a vulnerable population within an already vulnerable population. So with that, Carrie, I want to ask you, I know that we've had conversations at length, where do you feel that we are in terms of North Carolina for long-term survivors of brain injury?
We have so far to go. And Rose, we've talked about this a little also. We need better funding, and the only way we can get better funding is through, I believe, the number one thing we need to do, and not just decide we're going to do it, but we need the funds to implement it, a traumatic brain injury registry. I know there's a brain health registry. Well, that's for researchers. And they, you get on a list if you have a brain injury, and there's a lot of contacts at hospitals, to try to engage and get that in North Carolina, widely participating brain injured individuals to sign up for the research projects. But we need a registry so that we can show our legislature that we have the numbers. And there is a schism between the military veteran side and the overall civilian population with brain injury. As a volunteer in the Brain Injury Association of North Carolina, I have to say I joined selfishly because I wanted to see if I could evoke a difference. Even as now chair emerita of the association, I don't feel like I really got very far in a lot of ways. I felt some degree of satisfaction in certain programs and things that I saw being implemented and voicing my thoughts and issues. But honestly, traumatic brain injury is so varied and is so broadly misunderstood that it's overlooked. I'll save that other part if you're going to have a specific point to the question that I brought up in the very beginning. I can save that or elaborate now, whichever is more convenient for you. But in the arena of family court, I would like to say that was my selfish reason for getting involved in the Brain Injury Association. I thought out of ignorance and a lot of energy, that maybe I could make a difference in how family court perceived custody of brain injured. Well, I found out that they don't know each other, and they don't like each other, and they don't exist together in one room. Case in point, my daughter, and I brought up, I thought, well, why couldn't we call Kimmy's brain injury a disability? And she needed an accommodation, and that accommodation could be a person like me who's a champion, someone who's helping her, so that we could keep that family unit where the child has both a mother and a father in the picture raising that child. It isn't all about being able to walk across a field with a child. It's about being with the child. And just because an individual has a brain injury doesn't mean that there isn't a love bond. And when you rip that away because you give full custody to the healthy parent, and the only crime my daughter committed was a brain injury, she'd have more rights if she had been a drug dealer, as long as she didn't deal drugs around the child while she's sharing custody. She would have more rights if she had committed an actual crime. But we don't understand brain injury enough. And so it's determined that she didn't have the right to have custody. And as a result, we don't see our granddaughter, but more importantly, the daughter doesn't see her mother, her biological mother, and hasn't had a relationship really to speak of in 10 years. So that's the sad fact that, brain injury, it hurts, it disrupts marriages, it disrupts family lifestyles. Nothing good comes out of brain injury. And the best thing we can do, in my opinion, is develop a better understanding by getting a registry to know just how prevalent it is out there. And let's look at maybe using the veteran and the military community more as models for the rest of the state, as opposed to, oh, that's an element and they're taken care of by the VA and they get their needs taken care of. No, let's look at this as an opportunity in the veteran and the military community that we can shine a light to show, after with a registry across the state, that we can make a difference by enacting certain things. Final thing I want to say, and I know I've talked way too long, guys. Thanks for listening, everyone. The idea of treating brain injury. I'm on this kick now. We're on dive 48. My daughter is getting hyperbaric oxygen therapy. There's a visionary out there. His name's Edward D. Girolamo, and he owns a center called Extavita, and we have been getting free through the state of North Carolina because legislators that are pro-veteran and pro-veterans with traumatic brain injury, military also, money has been put aside to support them for free hyperbaric oxygen therapy treatment. And I'm here to tell you it works. Even in my daughter's case, where she is so severe, I'm seeing changes because we're treating brain injury not like an illness with meds and counseling, not treating PTSD or PTS like an illness, but rather an injury that comes as a result of maybe TBI. And we can maybe lower the suicide ideations and everything that accompanies PTS by treating it as an injury that can heal. And using hyperbaric oxygen therapy, in my opinion, is the answer of the future. One of the answers that we have within grasp. And this visionary, Edward, he has a dream to take hyperbaric oxygen therapy all across the state of North Carolina. Right now, for veterans, he's merging a nonprofit with a for-profit entity business model. And then after he accomplishes that, he wants to bring it across the US. Accessibility and lifestyle changes to incorporate HBOT into the availability for our brain injured out there so that maybe they can heal.
Wow, that's incredible. I had no idea. I think we've touched on so many different things, the caregivers, the challenges, where we are now, specific populations, and one of you, I'm not sure who mentioned it specifically, that there's a large misunderstanding within brain injury. I think maybe all of you mentioned it in some capacity, but I want to ask, what do you feel as an individual is the thing that is most misunderstood about your brain injury? So I want to bring that to Saleha to talk about her experience as a spouse. What do you feel is the thing that is the most misunderstood of your husband?
For me, that he's a big, strong guy. He's perfectly fine. When I know that he is not, you know, I know that there is a real possibility his symptoms can worsen over time. So just accepting that realization and accepting what my role look like in the future as opposed to now, and preparing mentally for the best, but also kind of low key bracing yourself just in case it takes a turn for the worse. What I would say for him, his big thing is he still wants to be what he was before the injury. And I don't think that's possible. He knows it's not possible, but we try and make it as normal or as close to that as we can while we can, you know, and for us is bringing awareness to the disease and letting people know, hey, just because someone looks normal doesn't mean they don't suffer from a disability. And we all face certain things, or we may all struggle from different things. But just because you feel like we can hold a conversation, we can do activities continuously, you know, like traveling back and forth to work doesn't mean that someone is not suffering. Doesn't mean that they don't have difficulties in their life. And we need to offer better resources for them. And hearing what's that, Carrie? I'm like, I'm so interested to see in what capacity would that help. Maybe that would lessen the chance of anything worsening with my husband, you know, but the VA definitely is not going to tell him or I that. They're not going to say, hey, there are these resources, come, we have things for you. So we have to do something for that. And if a registry will make that easier, I'm all for it.
Thank you for sharing that. Adam, what do you feel people misunderstand about your brain injury?
I think with many cases, brain injuries can be invisible injury. I've been fortunate enough to be high functioning, and the structures I've had around me growing up have facilitated me to be a high functioning, highly productive person. But I have to think about what I have to say, what I want to say before I say it. You know, is one example of things. It's very difficult for me to just kind of wing a response. So it comes across as a speech impediment. I think to me, it's about a compassion. It's a lesson learned for me, and that, as Celia mentioned, and to borrow some of what you were saying, you turn it into something else. Perhaps is that everyone's dealing with some kind of struggle, and it provides a certain compassion to live with it. And you know, this isn't a pain Olympics, and we should try to support each other as much as we can, and try to get involved locally and support each other in venues like this.
I think that I think we've all touched on the fact that brain injury often can look like an invisible disability. And some of you have even mentioned the accessibility issues that you feel when it comes to society. I see that in general, because I'm not sure who said it, but it's almost like there's not enough disability parking spaces anymore, because a lot of people are now experiencing disability. It's not that they didn't before, but it's more socially acceptable, and it's more okay. It's more socially okay to, you know, seek those services such as a parking space. But I think about it because I was in one of those like parking garages, and I saw only four. And I think that it's often misunderstood that people with invisible disabilities, they don't have a space in those areas of, accessibility. And in reality, we do. So I want to ask, Rose and her husband, what's the biggest thing that you feel is misunderstood about your injury?
So I know this is a panel, and one of the things, and I hope this goes out wide educationally, one of the things that for post 9/11 veterans, those who have served after the September 11th, 2001 attacks, they have noted that are 3 signature injuries of this era's war. And they've called them signature injuries. They are post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury, and military sexual trauma. They've called them the 3 signature injuries of war. They've also been co-labeled the invisible injuries of war, because you can't I have all 3 of them, but looking at me, you cannot say she has a disability. He has 2 of them. And what I do, and Carrie has hit on this a little bit, Salee and Adam have both hit on this. And what I do want to key in on this is backed by research, and you guys may or may not understand this, but I want to applaud you in noticing this and experiencing this, because it is widely misunderstood in the veteran community at large, and personally felt by many of us, that society as a whole believes that a lot of veterans have PTSD. And when going in, and my husband can attest to this, going in, now VA providers are seeing this. If you have a diagnosis of PTSD, a lot of them are seeing that PTSD and your TBI diagnosis are going hand in hand, especially if you've experienced combat. So they're recognizing that, but it is a misunderstanding. So your symptoms of TBI are often misunderstood for PTSD. And those of us that are veterans that have been deployed, they get mistaken for that. And so the irritability, the mood changes, the quick to anger type thing. If you do have a TBI, and you've been diagnosed with both, Salee, you've mentioned that you don't know if some of these symptoms are early onset of some other disease, or if it's the TBI. Well, those have been dual diagnosis. Is this PTSD or the TBI? And you can't be sure. And then Adam has mentioned that, those of us diagnosed with TBI, and I've said this in our brain injury meetings, that I've noticed that the survivors in the meetings are hesitant to speak up, that they will not voice their opinions, that they are not loud or vocal when other people are. And that is because we have learned a learned behavior, and I think it's a result of our TBI, that we have had emotional outbursts, that we will say things will come out of our mouths, and that's not what we meant to say. And we have to back up and be like, okay, no, that's not what I meant to say. And I have learned in my council meetings that other people end up translating for me, and that's okay. And I say it and I own it. I'm like, okay, I say things and things come out and they don't mean it that way. And I end up talking fast, and I tell people I have a TBI and this is what happens. And so I think that is, I own it and I tell people. And because how am I supposed to advocate for the community I am representing without telling people? Because my disability is invincible. But if I'm advocating for this community, that's the way. But that misunderstanding is absolutely there because it's an invisible injury. Because as veterans, if people don't know I'm a veteran, and that's okay, but walking, talking injuries like this one, I adore, you know, his TBI will like that be equated for, oh, you're just an angry veteran with PTSD. And it's a stigma that is absolutely attached. And so I think that is the biggest misunderstanding that's out there, especially because it is a signature injury of this war, but it's also an invisible injury of this war. And I think we will find that going back in our wartime repertoire with the veteran community, that's also true. But we're just angry people. But I think we're angry people with injuries. So that's what
You make excellent points there. We often forget about what the TBI does and how it manifests. How about your husband? What do you feel is the biggest thing that people misunderstand?
Well, in reality, I have very few friends, and that's by design. I've learned over the years that I don't really trust too many people, and the people I trust, I still keep them at arm's length. And all that means is I've been burned too many times. And I can tell you, most of us here probably understand this. If I'm talking, I play a lot of golf. I play at a club where we got a lot of civilians. We got a lot of former military guys too, some retirees and veterans. I spend my time playing with those guys, and the only reason is, and these are guys, Vietnam warrior guys. We did have a Korean War veteran guy, but he passed away. But we're the only ones that understand what we've been through and our shared experiences. I can sit there and talk to another guy, literally sitting next to me, at a table, and he just looks at me and he says, well, how'd you hurt your head? How'd you hurt your back? And I said, well, jumping out of an airplane with 100 pounds on your back or 100 pounds strapped to you, they don't get it. And that's kind of, at the end of the day, I just kind of look at civilians the way they look at me. They're kind of foreign objects. They're kind of aliens because they don't understand what I've been through and what all my friends and peers, and teammates have been through. And we've been through a lot of stuff. And so, when Carrie said, as a young lieutenant, her first jump, she was knocked out at Fire Drop Zone at Fort Benning. And I can totally get the black hat looking at her and telling her to get up and move out, get to the assembly area and turning point.
probably wasn't that nice.
But the reality is, honestly, I can't talk to other people other than fellow veterans about anything. It's like you're like talking a totally different language. Even though you're speaking English to an English speaking person, without that military experience, they say, well, thank you for your service, which that seems kind of, I don't know, it just seems like platitudes. But at the end of the day, the people that we deal with, even in my line of work, we deal with other veterans, other people who understand what we've been through. And then the few civilians that we deal with, it's because they've made it a point in their lives to get involved with the things that we've gone through and understand us. They didn't serve, but they do at least understand our language, our culture, and that works out for them. And we actually get, we get along with people like that just fine.
Yeah, I really like what you mentioned there, that, you surround yourself with other veterans. And I've noticed, not, and I really live by the motto, veterans trust other veterans, because it's not just a connection. It's further than that. It's like, Rose one time told me it's a bond and a brotherhood. In our last committee meeting, she really explained that bond, it's unbreakable forever, while you're serving and afterwards.
And I'd like to add this thing, and this is to help you understand, but maybe for the other members of the panel or people from the panel. I know this is recorded, Desiree. So people of our generation, and I'm saying post 9/11, and it's not just post 9/11, post draft. And Carrie and Adam, and Celise, maybe your husband will, back me up on this. Our generation of veterans, we don't like to be thanked. You know, when people say thank you for your service, we kind of be like, my husband just said it, it's kind of like platitudes for us. And it is because we were not drafted. And some people have not pinpointed that. And it is because we're not drafted. Our heroes are the men that were drafted and served because they didn't have a choice. We had a choice. We enlisted because that was our choice and it was our honor. And so when I said to you during that last meeting, and it was for the TBI Injustice Initiative, when we see other veterans succeeding, we're succeeding. And when they fail, we fail. And so that's why these veteran things, it's so important to us, because when they succeed, we succeed. And it's a big deal. And so for us, like for a Vietnam veteran, the best thing you can say to them is welcome home, because nobody told them that. They got spit on. They got, you know, I don't know. I saw a Vietnam veteran about 2 months ago, and I asked him what war he served in, and he told me Vietnam, and I told him welcome home, and he about broke down crying and gave me a big hug. He said, "You're the second person in my life that's told me that." And so that is a big deal. So when you're talking to them, you know, welcome home is a big deal to them. Thank them for their service. Those draftees did not have a choice. We had a choice. So, you know, a lot of people have said, we remember, and just, we remember. And it reminds us, you remember what we're fighting, what we fought for, or you remember our brothers and sisters, because we remember, because some of them didn't get a chance to come home. And some of them lost a lot more than we did. You know, people thank me for my service or thank me for what I sacrificed. And what I have, and, you know, I know Adam and Carrie and, you know, my husband, like, we're all like, we're thankful for all of the injuries we have, because we know it could have been so much worse, because so many others sacrifice so much more than we have. And we feel like we're the ones that are thankful that we were honored. And so for us, it's just like, we don't like being thanked because we chose this. Our heroes are the ones that we didn't choose. So it's more, if you want to honor us, tell us you remember. And so, yeah.
I like
know,
that
we're
addition.
over.
I like that addition you had, and I love that Carrie's dog is now joining us. I do want to mention, you know, that I appreciate everything that you guys are sharing. This is very, you know, raw and personal, and you're sharing it with the world, because we hope that this goes far. We intend for it to, you know, and to wrap us up, I know that we had a list of questions and we definitely haven't gotten to all of them, but we've answered them in different ways, actually, without necessarily posing them. So, you know, Carrie touched on how we can improve North Carolina. You know, Saleha has mentioned, you know, how caregivers, just like Carrie, are essential and how these changes happen. Adams mentioned that what he feels is different from a brain injury or not a brain injury, and the importance of distinguishing it. Rose and her husband have touched on what it's like for long-term folks that have a brain injury, and how we can better improve, you know, veteran services awareness advocacy when it comes to brain injury as a whole. You know, and I want to pose to you guys the last question: what do you feel North Carolina can do to improve, you know, overall advocacy in this? And what do you want people to know about your brain? What's the thing that you feel you really want people to know? So I'll start with Carrie.
Come back to me. I want to think about it.
Okay. So what do you feel North Carolina can do to improve? I know we talked about it already a little bit with Carrie's idea, but what do you feel, you know, could improve in the idea of helping your husband or anyone else?
I think definitely awareness and sharing knowledge with as many people as possible. you don't have to wait until someone is suffering from a TBI. So just having that information out there as much as possible would be great. So for me, that would be the number one thing, putting it out there, making awareness about TBI. Again, we have heard so many people get it confused with PTSD, and some people do suffer with both, such as my husband, but just having the awareness out there and how people can get involved in their communities, I think would be great.
That's a great point. I think oftentimes we stay bubbled up in our own community or in our own world, even though we want to help. And because we don't always know where the veterans are in the community or where the services are, as civilians, sometimes it's harder to see how can we help, how can we do it, when in reality it's kind of like what Rose said. Whenever you meet someone, whenever you see someone, tell them what she had mentioned, but also ask them, how can I help? How can I help? How can I be, you were service to our country. How can I help service in helping you to further, whatever it is that you're facing? Adam, what do you feel North Carolina can do to better help veterans?
I think we talked about awareness, but I think there's a certain individual responsibility that we have to bring to our communities. Every person on this call, 5 sets of folks, I guess you could say, live in 5 different communities. Almost every town or city council has public commentary that's available. You can take an hour of your time to show up to your town, maybe once a month, and just ask them, hey, put some kind of public commentary in the town announcements to talk about traumatic brain injury awareness, and ask them to talk about it with somebody else. And it's kind of like paying it forward. Just that one small action that each of us can take can make a difference and spread awareness, because I think that's how we make change. We make folks aware that there's a problem.
I liked what you said there, paying it forward. I think a lot of us, when we have something that was a blessing or something super helpful that changed our lives, especially those who are, veterans or have a disability or any other minority and vulnerable community, a lot of us want to pay it forward, what we were given. Rose, what do you feel North Carolina can do? And I know I'm asking the chair of the council, but what do you feel we can do to better?
Well, one of the things that, first of all, we have recruiting for our prevention committee on part of the council, and I think that's one of the key things that we can do. And I say that, one of the things that I love that's being done right now is your TBI and Justice Initiative, and because that is a catalyst for education and awareness. And that's not just talking. I think a lot of people, and that's one of the things as chair I've noticed, there's a lot of talking and little action. And so I love what Adam just said, is that it's an individual responsibility. But as for North Carolina, I think that we have a responsibility as a community, and if we pull together as a community, we can take a community-wide approach and pull together and then launch action plans throughout North Carolina. And so this awareness campaign can be facilitated throughout the state through connections like this. So I would invite all of you to please join or recommend people join the prevention committee, so we can take ideas like Adam's and then publish and perpetuate these initiatives throughout the state. So I think they're phenomenal, but they're not the only ones. And so I think that could work, but it's not idea. We take ideas like that and make them into actions. And I think that's the only way we're going to go forward, is take ideas and morph them into actions for the state.
I like that. It's a really good point. What does your husband feel we can do to better improve for North Carolina, the services and advocacy?
You know, that's a loaded question because I deal with, you know, I'm a contractor for Special Operations Command down in Tampa, even though I'm here at Fort Bragg. That encompasses SEALs, MARSOC, Air Force Special Operations, Green Berets, Rangers, Delta, you name it. Um, you know, we support roughly 50,000 Special Operations forces, nationwide, worldwide. So every day, my job is actually helping many folks, and we have a model that we use. I'm an advocate. I'm a recovery care coordinator. I'm a problem solver. When someone says, "Do you have an elevator speech?" I said, "Well, if we keep going up and down the Empire State Building for an hour, yeah, because there's not a whole lot that we don't do." But I'm not a doctor. I'm not a provider. I'm not a clinician. I'm just a retired command sergeant major. But I've been around a lot, and I know a lot of things, and I have a lot of contacts with people. So to say what can we better do in North Carolina, I don't know. I know what works for us. I know what our model looks like, and it's advocacy and it's staying in contact with our clients. The thing is, I have over the course of the almost 8 years now since I retired, I've got about 400 clients, both now veterans and still active, and I know what we do to support them. It's very there's a lot of energy that goes into it helping a lot of these folks. And I could see, at the state level, I could see some of the models that we use in my organization, which are technically proprietary, but all it is just taking care of people. Um, some of the things we could do could be used at the state level. But then it's the question I ask is, well, who are those people that are going to do those things? I'm one of those people that does those things in the special operations community, just like the other ones in my office and nationwide. So we are those people, but we have a finite population that we deal with. They're a very specialized population. It works for us. I don't know how you translate that into a statewide thing. I mean, some of the models would be similar, the way you do things, the way you help people, but where are those people going to come from? Because I know anywhere where someone's been hurt, you got providers, you got counselors, you got doctors, nurses, and all those people. But at the end of the day, yeah, Rose is writing down a dollar sign. A lot of things come down to money. We all know that money drives the train on everything. I'm sure Carrie can attest to that with things that she goes through with her daughter. But there's a lot of things out there that we could do. I don't have a good answer other than I'd be willing to share, things that we do for our clients that if somebody at a higher level could, somebody smarter than me, I'm a knuckle dragger, I'm good at moving heavy stuff. But if, someone could listen to ideas and how to incorporate that, I know I'd be willing to talk to them, but I honestly don't have a good answer at the state level. But like Adam was talking about, community level, I work at the community level in my community in the military. How does that the Army doesn't do what we do for the most part. The average soldier in the Army just gets processed out when they get hurt or whatever. They got a little bit of advocacy, but it's it's this much compared to what we do is this much. So
I
wish I had a
like what
better
you
answer
mentioned.
for you.
No, you do. That was a great answer because I think a lot of the times, we're all involved in these community efforts. The Brain Injury Council, Brain Injury Association, Carrie being the chair, you working with folks in Fort Bragg, I think all of these things encompass the fact that we need to bring them together because a lot of the times most people don't know that there's a Brain Injury Advisory Council or Brain Injury Association. These entities that help people with brain injury, not just the TBI, but the non-traumatic ones as well. Folks don't know that they exist. And that in and of itself encompasses the entire answer everyone's saying. Advocacy, education, spreading, and awareness. And for those who are watching this, I really hope that you guys look up the Brain Injury Association, the Brain Injury Advisory Council. And if you think you have a brain injury, attend one of the council meetings. Learn about it, hear about it. I want to go back to Carrie. What do you feel North Carolina can do to better help advocacy and awareness for brain injury?
Well, I just want to point out several things, beginning with you, Desiree. I think you just calling this group together, how empowering it makes us feel. And it truly is cathartic for us because, we can express things that we want others to know, Celia, I think you're a dynamic, you're going to do something great, with your supporting your husband. And I do encourage you to look into the Elizabeth Dole Foundation because I think you'd be a great fellow. Adam, thank you for your ideas on the community level support, starting at the grassroots, and right there with that, Rose, bringing it all together, and John, you with your unbelievable wealth of experience, and you're so inundated with all the different experiences, and it's hard to create order out of the chaos. I think I would say a couple things with this. I would say veterans are really strong, and we have nearly 800,000 veterans in our state. We need to utilize our veterans better. We need to use them, the live to give folks out there. That's what they are. Honestly, veterans, they strike me as, and they just need a framework to help them find places they can do that. Starting at the grassroots level, collaborations. And that's where Disability Rights of North Carolina can collaborate with different entities like the Brain Injury Association of North Carolina, which you're successfully doing now and have been for a while, and the social justice work you're doing with that. But it will never accomplish it, but we're on our way, and it takes visionaries also. So that's the final thing I wanted to bring up. I go full scale back to this, treating brain injury as an injury and not an illness. I love that idea. And it can heal in some part, maybe in large part. And one of the ways that we can accomplish that, I know in Special Ops Command, Delta, I think they used one of my friends from the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, Brian Vines, SF guy. The rooms, for helping heal with hyperbaric oxygen therapy and Delta and I don't know, special ops, but they're really working with their military members to try to help in avenues, maybe not out there, Anyway, and then I think finally, the idea of the paying it forward that Rose mentioned, and I will be celebrating tomorrow night, Rose, and you know about it, right? Tomorrow night. Do you know about tomorrow? Yeah. So we have a veteran
tomorrow,
right?
The Brain Injury Association, the 40th. Yeah.
Yes, it's a big deal. It's our first, it's going to be a great celebration. And we do have 5-star videography and live streaming. So, actually, I can work to try to find the link. I best the best way is HBOT News. If you look HBOT News, they have a live streaming service. There's other links on YouTube and things like that, but that's the one that comes to mind. 5:30 to 9. It is live streamed, and there will be an award ceremony, and one of our very own here will be recognized for unbelievable service and what she's done, in part to help accomplish across our state. So we'll be, really like, hey, one of our own, happy about that. And I guess it's an ongoing thing, but we'll never give up,
We can't give up. None of us can. I think we all want to pay forward what's been given to us, the second chance at life, the opportunity to be here to care for our loved ones that have a brain injury and ourselves. I want to give the floor to anyone who wants to say any last few words before I do the wrap up.
Desiree, I want to thank you for bringing us all together. I think it's phenomenal that you brought us together and allowed us to cover these issues and in advance for Veterans Day. So I appreciate it, and I really do appreciate all the work you're doing, not only for disability rights, but for this the TBI. I'm having a
It's
yes.
been a long call. I get
No,
it.
no, no, no. I'm having one of those things. You know, my husband tells me it's a middle age thing, and I'm like, I don't know if it's a middle age thing or a TBI thing. Your TBI injustice. That. See, I remembered. So the TBI injustice, but you know, I think you are doing phenomenal work, and I'm so glad to meet you, Miss Celie, and to see the rest of the members of this panel. And you know, it's great. This is a great panel. So thank you for inviting us and letting us speak on these issues. I think this is very important, and I would love to continue this conversation in offline with many of these panel members. So thank you for getting us together.
Thank you all for being here. I mean, I couldn't do a lot of the work without the support you guys have. All of you are you know, involved in this justice initiative in some capacity, either being, people on the committee or folks who I speak with. And I know that we have another meeting coming up, and I hope that we can talk about this there. I think it's been such an honor to meet you guys, get to know each of your stories, because I've talked to each of you independently and asked, like, hey, what affects you? What is it impacting you? And you've all said such different things. There's an intersection of need for advocacy and the fact that you're all veterans, but you've all experienced it differently and you all go through life differently. Is there anyone else who wants to say some last words on their part?
Yeah, I just would love to say thank you for the opportunity and thank you for having me. It's been great. It's been a lot of information, and it's also wonderful when you have people who make you feel at home in a group, and you don't feel alone, and you don't feel discouraged like you're just one person with a mission or a voice. Knowing that collectively we may go through different things, but we're all in the same fight together, and that's just the betterment of humanity. Um, and in that, we're bettering people that have that traumatic brain injury. And I'm just thankful to know that at any given time, there are people I can reach out to and say, hey, I'm experiencing this. Where can I go? So thank you for introducing me to other people who are like-minded. And it has been a pleasure being on this panel, serving with you all. And I am definitely going to take your advice, Carrie. So I'll be talking to you.
You see, it's the importance of sharing knowledge that changes, something even to a small degree. Anyone else before we close out? Well, I want to thank you all for being here. I also want to give a special shout out to my parents specifically. My dad is a Navy veteran. He served for many years. And we grew up in Puerto Rico, and he and my mom being working in the federal government, they showed me the importance of, unity and the importance of, being there for the folks who, gave their lives. So I really appreciate them for showing me the meaning of what we stand for. So thank you all for being here, and say something to your local veterans on Veterans Day, and thanks everyone.